Knowing each of us are having a different experience of today, we are going to do a quick practice together that will help us regulate our heart rate and ground us down so we'll be in a more optimal state for learning and receiving information. So I invite you to close your eyes or find a soft gaze and get comfortable. We're going to do a few breaths together with a slower exhale. So we will breathe in for 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Last one. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And just like that, we are in a state of awareness with our breath. And I invite you to open your eyes back up. So yes, in case you're wondering, I am a meditation teacher, but I also ran an HR department for 6 years prior to starting my own business, my own journey with entrepreneurship. So my first business I launched in 2016, a co-work space called WorkLab in Vancouver. And the focus of WorkLab has always come from the ethos and idea that we need to optimize our well-being into our experience of business and work. To produce our best work, we must be in an optimal state. And through WorkLab, I've also been closely connected to new ways of working, including remote work for the last 5 years. So I now reside in London as a workplace wellness consultant and people strategist and coach. In order for us to build upon this concept of conscious leadership, I think it's important that we get clear on the definitions of the principles, or these two pieces that come together. So I think it's safe to say that we probably all know leadership a little bit more than consciousness in this room, this digital room. And leadership really is the art of motivating a group of people to act towards achieving a common goal. So how can you cultivate that energetic motion towards a goal? And consciousness. Well, consciousness is the state of being aware and responsive to one's surroundings. Oftentimes, consciousness and mindfulness are said hand in hand. So let's do a pulse check on where we're at in the world of HR. In our work, in our departments, in our influence. And I think it's safe to say that we can now throw out that archaic HR handbook. We really do hold the keys now as the most innovative opportunity in business as of actually March 2020 moving forward. I think personally that HR has always been the most innovative opportunity in business, but now more than ever. We might have spent the last 10 months in recovery and reacting to what's going on, but now we really hold the keys to intentionally strategize, putting humans first in business like never before. But it's been in a pressure cooker since COVID, so the way which we manage or navigate people and lead teams and organizations, it needs to transform. And you are obviously all here developing yourselves. So I commend you. And it's not going to be easy work, but it can be profoundly impactful when it's given the right intention and the right attention. We can make big change and big impact. As we're all here today gathering over HR matters, I thought it would be wise for us to also define and look at employee engagement. It's a term that's often a metric, it's something we strive for, especially in our departments, in HR, and we don't take time to pause and look at what is employee engagement. And so I define employee engagement as the emotional commitment the employee has to the organization. We often don't talk about emotions when it comes to work, and yet one of our biggest metrics is really defined by that emotional connection. We're going to look at some of the key components that's impacting our work right now and how we show up as leaders. The most obvious one, of course, is going to be health. So, an EY poll or data fact was that 45% of people are reporting that stress and worry are having a negative impact on mental health post COVID. This, of course, is no shock. We're seeing an ongoing spike in burnout and other mental health issues. And it makes sense. Our stress response has been tested with fear and suffering for almost a year now. People are starting to wear thin, and something I think that's quite fascinating is in crisis, as humans, we naturally gather. A very obvious and timely example would be the death of Princess Diana. And I only say that, of course, because of the crown. But we come together in crisis, we gather. It is a natural response in our society, in humankind, to gather in grief and suffering. Connection is an imperative part of our well-being. And right now, we have had this enduring period of time of suffering, of reactivity. And when people are also in this state, they can't actually access their strategic brain. We're more reactive. The overproduction of cortisol impacts our access to our prefrontal cortex. So I don't know if you guys have found this, but it's common more than ever that we're getting people reacting that, it just doesn't add up, their reaction to things. And this is because it's like an ice chip that we're like chipping away, and people are in this state of vulnerability that they probably maybe haven't even seen in their lifetime before. And this, of course, is going to impact work and the work they do, the work they produce for your organizations, and how they engage with one another. And of course, it will impact what their needs are, needs of the company, needs of leaders, needs of their peers, what support looks like. So it's evident that the way we work will be changed forever. There's no going back, and we can either fight it or we can innovate and harness and leverage these new opportunities and ensure we're being supportive in the process. Our experience of a company has so often been tied to the office. When you ask someone about what's it like to work for XYZ company, they'd be like, well, we wear Converse to work, it's pretty chill, we have beer on Thursdays, they provide us a vegan food option. And they were often speaking to the experience of physically being in the office. So it wasn't about, the human side so much. They would often attribute the culture to the experience of the office. So when we remove that central focus of the office, that leaves us with how do we feel in the day-to-day communication and how I'm being spoken to by my manager, by my peers. The experience of how someone feels has become so much more humanistic and interpersonal, and they start to feel their experience of their day-to-day in a different capacity when you're sitting at your kitchen table doing your work, from 8 to 5, and it's the same place you're eating dinner, and you notice a stark difference in how you feel there. People are going to start examining that. Initially, in the work from home, pandemic shift, we saw a spike in productivity, but as HBR, as Harvard Business Review, has reported, the productivity has now dropped to pre-pandemic days, it's dropped 12% and engagement has declined 14%. And if companies don't start thinking strategically about communication strategies, about how we treat our employees, how we communicate, what is the experience of working for this business, we are going to see those numbers get bigger and bigger. The top reasons that individuals want to get back into the office when they have the opportunities for connecting with colleagues, to feel a sense of purpose within the organization. So, in a world of over connection through technology, we really are lacking that in real life experience that can't be replaced. And provided the constraints, we can still do our best to support connection to one another and support connection to our organization's purpose and mission. Diving into our third and final component and influencing energy or factor that's impacting HR and leadership is generational needs. The generations, the millennials and Gen Zs, this was there pre-COVID. So this isn't new news. I think the importance has been magnified through COVID and through the pandemic, but this was absolutely a prevalent need to be addressed before the pandemic. Gen Zs and millennials now represent 59% of the global workforce. That's close to 2/3. And we haven't thought long and hard about what their needs are in the context of work. And we often have complained, but not actually taken the time to understand and honor the environments in which they have grown up and learned and been educated in, and how that influences their perception of the world, how they engage with it, and how to actually leverage their skills and talents that might be unique compared to other generations. To inform, in case anyone's scratching their head at what is a Gen Z, well, it is the generation between right now age of 6 to 24. And that generation is 3 times more likely to change jobs swiftly compared to any other generation. They'll do it without any of the hindrances that came upon the other generations or would impact our decision making process. And retaining talent in this generation really will come down to, how do you make them feel? Are they able to grow where they work? Do they feel connected? And also, a demand and need is flexibility and being dynamic in approach. And as a millennial, I can tell you that growing up in one of my first jobs, everyone would just have the comments and fighting, millennials and these assumptions around, who they are in the workplace. And instead of actually stepping back and being mindful of looking at the circumstances of the environment, of the influence of technology, of all of these other pieces that has impacted them to be the way they are, and how can you leverage instead of fight these key influencing factors. So I think that Gen Zs are a fascinating generation, but they are going to require us to show up differently. And it is in alignment with a lot of the other things we're talking about today, about universally what we need as humans in the workplace as of COVID and even from before. Now is our time to evaluate and examine leadership, and what's worked in the past and what will no longer serve us in the here and now and moving forward. We often look at leadership in the history of time and associate it with power and conflict and, taking over and colonialism. And this shows up in key individuals who represent these leaders: Julius Caesar, Henry VIII, Alexander the Great. And it's fascinating if we observe the portraits that we have of these so-called leaders, and they look angry and serious and domineering in some regard, quite severe and aggressive. And it was really back then about winning wars. And as a book that I love and often reflect upon called Shakti Leadership, it speaks about how we took this way of leading on killing fields into business boardrooms. And these traditional leadership structures or ways of being really are hierarchical and about power and authority. And we saw leadership as maintaining order in these hierarchical structures. And that won't help us moving forward. That won't help us as we navigate the new and we navigate with all of these outside factors contributing. So, this old paradigm of leadership is not going to serve us. So, what will? Today's leadership requires navigating ambiguity around things not going always according to plan. That as a business, we might need to pivot a little more than we used to, being flexible. So, this leads to the concept of resiliency, which is our ability to adapt. And we can only do that by actually being in the present moment. So, do you see how the mindful element of being in presence and consciousness actually will support your business strategy? Being a conscious leader looks like developing a caring culture. Again, through presence, we can cultivate true connection by really being present with our subordinates or our peers. Mindful leaders or conscious leaders are comfortable in their knowing of self, comfortable in accessing vulnerability, knowing that vulnerability is a core component in human connection. And vulnerability isn't crying on the couch at the office. It could look like that, but really it's about being their authentic human self. That allows us to access empathy in a different capacity. So if we can create space for the development of these mindful skills, of practices and strategies built into how we operate as a business, we will feel it woven through our company culture, through our employee engagement, through the well-being of our staff and the performance of the individuals that make up our business. This is what is required to really set your business apart moving forward, is looking at what is the felt experience of our organization. And naturally, because of power dynamics, you have to look at the structure and you have to look at management. And also, we develop our people, their AutoCAD skills or their technical skills. And where are we actually putting time and energy into developing our human skills? Not in a formulaic way, but knowing that when we develop as individuals in a level of self-mastery, that impacts the way we show up with others. How are our staff being trained to have and navigate a challenging conversation? These are fundamental human skills that are under the microscope in the way we're working now, in the generational component, in the fact that the fragility of people's mental health and well-being is highlighted like never before. It is our job as leaders within our businesses, as leaders of people and talent. It is our job to support the humans that are within our organizations to be the very best version of themselves, to support our business strategy. Thank you for spending the last 20 minutes together and for being an eyed open learner. I am more than happy to speak offline at the information provided. And if you are looking to develop a wellness program within your organization, I'm here to help as well. Have a great day.